Hello, everyone. This is Catherine Houghton. Hello. I'm the director for the Center for Health Experience Design for MadPow, and I'm so glad you were able to join us and for this webinar. So I'm excited to share this content with you. So today's webinar is on Agile behavior-based personas for better designs. And I just want to give you a brief introduction to the center, and it's only one slide before we start diving into the content. And so just a little bit of the Center for Health Experience Design, if you're not familiar. It's a community of change makers who take a collaborative approach to improving health and humanizing the health system. So what this center is about solving those really tough challenges in healthcare that require multiple stakeholders from across the ecosystem. So what we do is take on projects that involve people from different organizations. Maybe it's a nonprofit, a health system, and a pharma company working together to design a new solution to help transform healthcare. We've got a lot of different activities that we're working on right now. We have a membership model, including an online community that's free. We'd love for you to join it if you're not already on the online community. To learn more about the center, please visit our website at centerhxd.com, and you'll learn a lot more information there. So a little bit about us. So on the left, that's me. Hi, again, Catherine Houghton, Director of the Center for Health Experience Design. Our presenters today will be Priyama Barua, who's to my right. She's a Senior Experience Strategist at MadPow. And also we have Dana Ortegon, who's a Senior Content Strategist at MadPow. So thank you so much for joining us today. And just a few little facts before we get started is that I am recording this and I will be sending it out to all registered people after the fact. And we will also include the slides if you find them helpful, as well as the download link, which we'll explain a little bit more later. And then please submit your questions in the Q&A chat box. We have time set aside at the end to answer them. So with no further ado, let me please turn it over to Dana, who will tell you all about this. Hi, everybody. Wait, are you actually recording? Yes. Okay, just checking. So we are talking about personas today. I'm sure many of you are familiar with them, and there are lots of definitions. Here's one of them, which you might be most familiar with when you think of a persona. We almost think of it as being like a fake personality or something that someone puts on, a public persona. You may have heard it referred to like that. We have a little different definition of the persona, which is that personas are representations of our audience, your users, the people that are going to use whatever it is that you're designing, whether it's an app or a website or a product. And we like to use personas for all of the reasons that you'll see on this slide, but most importantly, it really helps us walk in the user's shoes and to understand them as real people. It's often hard when you're in the middle of a project to go beyond your creative brief and your business goals to see that there are actually real humans at the other end of your design. So from a more practical point of view, they also help keep teams aligned on their goals and working towards a common endpoint. So Alan Cooper first mentioned personas in his book, The Inmates Are Running the Asylum. He was working on a project doing a software program for project management, and as he was creating this new software, he found himself asking frequently, what would Kathy do? Kathy was a friend of his who was a project manager, so it was very easy as he was doing his work to imagine what she might be thinking, feeling, and doing at every step along the way. And by asking those questions and answering them, he really felt that he could improve the design that he delivered because he was very clearly trying to make something better for a person that he knew very well. So since the 90s, when personas were first mentioned, as you can see, there are a million kinds of them. They're all shapes and sizes. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about persona projects because, we've mentioned how great they are. And you would think that they would, just using personas would make any project a success. But we often see that personas fail, and they fail for, a bunch of different reasons. One of them might be that the team that creates them is from one small department or one silo within a company. They don't have a diverse team. It might be that the team that's doing them is doing them with a little bit of arm twisting. They don't actually believe in personas, but they've been told to do them, so they do them. They might do them not with any research, so this is without empirical evidence. It's basically people sitting in a room and saying, well, my cousin's brother is a millennial and she likes X. So you don't really get personas that work then. So people put a lot of time and effort into their personas, and then they end up with a product that they can't really use, they can't sell across their organization, and the whole project kind of leaves a bitter taste in their mouth. So as we've been working, these are kind of the reasons that we have seen personas fail in our projects. We were happy after we compiled our list to see that Nielsen Norman validated this. As you know, you can go through the list yourself, but you know, the four biggest issues are that they can take a lot of time and resources. If they're not based on demographics, or they might be based on demographics and not research, and they can often promote stereotypes. So we are not going to talk about all of these bullet points today, but we're going to focus on the first four because to us, they're like the biggest barrier for success when you're using personas. So Priyama now is going to walk you through those bullet points.
All right, hi everyone. So one of the key things and drawbacks of personas is that they take a lot of time to make, and it is resource intensive. You need a lot of people working on it. So we set out to actually find any data out there that might have information about this, and we found this great article by Nielsen Norman Group, which talks about how much time it takes to create personas. And if anyone is not familiar with the group, they do a lot of research around design and research methodologies. So they're a good source to go to if you're looking for information on what others are doing, what trends there are in the industries, what's worked for people, etc. So what we saw here was that they categorized two different kinds of personas: non-empirical, so basically based on assumptions, like Dana mentioned, or empirical, so based on data that people might have collected, whether it's qualitative or quantitative. And you'll see that they also drew a distinction between small and large companies. The blue part over here, if you can't read that tiny text there, is really conducting research. The gray part is analyzing data, and the third part, the pink part, is crafting persona assets. And this kind of time variation is something that we've seen in our work personally also. We spend a lot of time creating personas, and we believe that this process could be made faster. So that was one of our thinking behind what we're going to talk to you about today. The other thing we saw that is personas are often based on demographics. We had several people come to us and say, we want to design for a millennial, we want to design for an older audience. And along with those assumptions of demographics came a set of assumptions that people had made about their audience. So that never really helped tell us as designers or help their design teams understand what their users need. It doesn't tell us how people will react to products and services, and they don't tell us why people might do what they do when interacting with their product or service. So what really do we mean by demographics? So imagine the statement of a blonde woman in early 40s, married with children. So there are many people who have a different picture in their mind when they think of this, and think about what you have in your mind when we say this. Did you think about this? Or did you think about something like this? Or did you think about something like this? There can be a lot of variations on what that demographic actually means, but really does it tell you a lot about the person and who they are and how they behave? So using demographics can promote stereotypes. And what we really mean is that these are, we hear over and over again, simplifications of how people's personalities, that if someone must be a certain age, or certain color, or certain income bracket, they must behave a certain way. And those are stereotypes because that is not necessarily true. Several stereotypes out there could be things like gamers are mostly men, or only high net worth individuals buy luxury goods, or baby boomers don't like using technology, or millennials like to do everything digitally. So these are stereotypes which are out there, but what of the trends that challenge those stereotypes? What about the women who dominate the gaming industry, the low to middle income earners who would like to consume and do consume high-end luxury goods, baby boomers who are increasingly wanting to do everything digitally and want those channels to meet their needs, or millennials who would not like to do anything digitally. They would respond to direct mail. They would like to pick up the phone and call someone to answer their questions. These are challenges. These are challenges to stereotypes that do exist out there. So that brings us to behavior-based personas, and Dana will tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, so at MadPow in our work, we have found that behavior-based personas are just more actionable. We can actually take them and take our learnings and translate them into real design choices. So, just with that alone, they're more useful and they're more valuable, even, not even looking at the fact that it helps us avoid stereotyping, which is why we developed the methodology that we are going to introduce later on. So behavior-based personas are, based on behavior attributes. And behavior attributes, you might think of them as personality traits. If you're thinking about a person, we often think of, well, I'm detail-oriented, or she's a micromanager, things like that. And in our tool, we put the behavior attributes on a spectrum. There are an extreme at either end. So on this slide, if you think about decision-making, there are people who take a very active role. They never want to leave a decision up to someone else. They do a lot of research before they make a decision. It's very important for them to be the person that pulls the trigger on something. On the other end, you have the passive person who is willing to take advice. They want an expert to tell them, and almost they would rather not have to make a decision at all. So when we get to the point that we look at our behavior attributes and our constellations, you'll see these broad spectra of behaviors. When you think about the two types of personas that we're talking about, and we would take Priyama, her demographic profile tells you how old she is. It tells you her marital status and her family status, her education, her occupation, her geographic, where she is geographically now and where she has come from. If you look at a behavior-based persona in the healthcare field, you see someone who is overwhelmed by complexity. She wants an expert to tell her what to do. She really doesn't spend that much time looking for the best options. She just kind of chooses the easiest choice, and she sometimes, or always, doesn't follow a treatment plan. So when you look at these two personas, then imagine, which one would be easier to design with. So for us, we look at the behavior attributes of Priyama to help us design. And in this case, we know that she gets overwhelmed, so it's important to break everything down into very small steps, things that she can achieve bit by bit. She wants to be told exactly what to do. And, the problem here is that she doesn't spend a lot of time looking for the best option. She chooses what's easiest, and we would actually like to improve that situation for her. We want to help her not just default to the easiest choice. So we're going to give some nudges and some small pieces of education to try to get her to see all of her options. And since she has problems following a treatment plan, we're going to give her support along the way on her journey to help her be adherent. And now, I don't know about you, but I would find the behavior-based persona a lot easier. I do in my work. So now we will talk about our specific methodology for creating these Agile behavior-based personas, and Priyama's going to walk you through that.
Thank you. So as we've been working with personas for a long time now, we realized some of the drawbacks that we talked about earlier. We also realized that we have a rich body of detail or data that we are sitting on that we could use and make accessible to other people. So we created MPACT. It's really the MadPow Agile Persona Construction Toolkit. And today we'll be telling you a little bit about what it is and how it works, and also giving you access to a sort of light version of this kit so that you can apply it to your work and use the framework that we talk about today in your work. So this toolkit is a generative design tool that helps create behavior-based personas. So using this, you can have teams of people come together and you can create 1 to 5 behavior-based personas in a single day-long session, and compare that to the graph we showed you earlier about the amount of time it takes to create personas. So just to be very clear, this process is not meant for building enterprise personas for general use. So that's just one persona or a few personas that you build and you use over and over again. It is instead meant to build personas that are very project specific. So when you're working on a project or a feature or any particular solution, you use this kit to create the persona based on behavior attributes that we've provided. So today we are going to be talking mostly about the LITE kit, but we do have a version of this which is called the health kit. And this was formed out of hundreds of hours of research done previously. We also looked at existing psychological research and used all of that information to extract what are the main behavior attributes that affect how people take care of their own health, how they make decisions about their health, how they access information, how they want to be educated, and the whole really process of speaking to different people. We've realized we're seeing the trends, the same things over and over again across different projects in the health space, and that is across provider networks, insurance companies, health tech, and pharmacies that we are seeing these trends that we've included in the kit. So this is what the kit looks like when it's fully laid out. It's supposed to be a fun way to interact and build something which is useful and generative, but at the same time it draws in the people working on it with the bright colors and makes it collaborative. We've often been asked about a digital version, but we intentionally made it a physical prototype, so you actually get people into a room and you brainstorm together and talk about it together. So the beauty really is in the conversations that happen when the team is building out a persona or a set of personas in a day. So you have people looking over the information provided, you have them reading the cards, you have them discussing what they think is the right direction to go, what they've seen in users, what the research says. And it is a facilitated activity. So there is a facilitator's guide which has been provided, and that helps to have one person lead the entire group in the conversation. So it has tips about what you should be doing and what kind of timeline you should be expecting when running a session such as this. And we've also made this kit very actionable, and that's one of the drawbacks of personas that we discussed, that teams, they learn, they make the personas, but they don't know how to use them. So we've included tips, design tips in there, which Dana will talk to you more about later, that talk about if a persona shows a certain kind of personality trait, you should design for them in this way. And these design tips are not meant to be very prescriptive. They are very high-level directions for the design team. So the methodology, what it really is, so we do have a full kit, so you'll see that version laid out over here. So that kit exists in health and finance. But what's very important is the methodology, is what we'll be talking about today. And that is, like we said, behavior-based. It has behavior attributes that are related to health decision-making, or the finance kit has the one which are related to finance decision-making. And they're relevant to the patients and the audience to guide the persona building. So they're built on research. We recommend that the teams that are working on this collect actual research and use that to create the personas and have the discussion when they're in an MPACT session. They're agile. As I mentioned, you make this very context-specific for a certain product or service. And it is collaborative, so we encourage teams to have diverse members from technology, product managers, higher level stakeholders. One thing we often hear is the problem with socializing personas internally, because often they're built in silos. So by bringing more people into the persona building process, it's easier to socialize it. And it's action-oriented because it has design tips that can help guide the teams, the design teams, in how they design for this persona. So Dana will now provide you with a tour of the MPACT LITE, and as Catherine was mentioning, at the end of the session, we will give you a download code for the MPACT LITE kit so you can try it for yourself. So think of this as instructions of how to use that kit once you have it.
Hi. So I'm not going to hold up this board because this is actually a board for our health kit. The LITE kit that you will download will have a table map that maps to this here. So I'm just going to walk through each of the different parts. This is the table mat. It's the basis of everything. When you lay your cards out, you're going to be laying them out on this. It's kind of your character sheet, as it were. So next we have a facilitator's guide. This, as you can see, we call the little helper because it's actually a pretty comprehensive step-by-step walkthrough. Anyone can take this guide, spend an hour or two reading through it, and be able to facilitate a persona building session with a team. As Priyama mentioned, we do advise that every group have a facilitator and that the facilitator spend that couple of hours to really immerse in the process so that it's second nature when you're leading your team. So we always start the process by having your team choose a business objective. And with our full kits, we have pre-printed business objective cards. But for LITE, we just provide an overview and a card for creating your own business objectives. Business objectives are the goal that you're trying to achieve, that your team wants to achieve with these personas, and it might be something. We suggest that you make it as kind of specific and detailed as possible. So you don't want to say, we want more, we want people to use our app more. You really want to say, we'd like a 5% increase. Or you don't say, well, we don't want people to call customer service. You actually assign a number. You know, we want to see our call volume go down by X%. That gives you a chance to actually measure the success of using these personas with your project. So the business objective overview card describes what the objective is. It gives an example. It has a few notes. And the make your own card as well has just step-by-step instructions. Once you've set your business objective, the next step is to think about your persona objective. So this person who is going through this experience of downloading, let's say, a medication adherence app, you want to start thinking about that person. Their goal isn't going to be, I want to download a medication adherence app. Their goal might be something like, I have to start remembering to take my medicine. That it's more personal, it's more human. You really have to think of the person behind the action. And again, you will get in your in the LITE kit, there's a persona objective overview card that describes what a persona objective is. It gives some examples, and it has some notes. You can use the step-by-step things, instructions here to fill out on an index card or a sticky to place on your board. And once you've done your objectives, we move on to what we call the trigger events. Trigger event is, what has happened to make your persona need to interact with the medication adherence app. Maybe this person goes to the doctor says your blood pressure is 20 degrees higher than it was last time. You realize you haven't been taking your medicine, so now you've got to figure it out. These are just some of the trigger event cards that we have. It might be pregnancy, birth, unfamiliar symptoms. So these are kind of the event that pushes your persona to start interacting in this scenario. And again, you'll take those instructions and your trigger event card and you'll place them on the mat. So really this is where we start to get into the real meat of the methodology, which is starting to look at these behavior attributes. All of the behavior attribute cards that we have are based on the attributes on actual research that we have done, whether it was actual user interviews, hundreds and hundreds of them, or whether it was our LITE reviews for different projects. That's one thing that Priyama mentioned, that when you're doing this, you want to bring some research to the table if it's like very specific to your industry or your project. And after you've created a set of personas, if you're coming back a few years later, you want to make sure that you get some fresh research, or your personas might not actually apply anymore. So here we have our behavior constellations. The attributes are presented in groupings. So as you can see here, we have guidance, management, focus, decision, and execution. If we think back to Priyama's medication adherence issue and how we might get her to be adherent, and start thinking about what constellation we want to start with, looking at this board, we can go through all of our constellation overview cards, which I don't have here, but each constellation has an overview card that describes what attributes are contained within it. So you can see that execution here has 2 behavior attributes, the service preference and technological savviness. The individual behavior attribute cards describe the attributes in much more detail. You start to see these behavior attributes as more like personality traits, and you can start seeing people that you might know, or how these things would be enacted, how they might appear in real life if you knew a person who preferred self-service, or if you knew a person who only wanted digital service. As you look through all of the behavior attribute cards, it can help you start to put yourself into your user's shoes. So when we start to do this, we usually say pick one constellation. There's no right or wrong one to start with, but usually there's one that seems to make sense for your project. So as I said, in this case, we probably would have started with execution. You look through all your behavior attribute cards and pick which one seems to apply most, and then you're going to lay it on your table mat. The behavior attribute cards in the full kits actually list numbered design tips, which you can use, as Priyama mentioned, not to prescribe your designs, but actually inform them. So if you know someone gets overwhelmed, you might have a design tip around breaking content into small digestible chunks, or using interface design to lessen the cognitive load on this user. But each attribute will give you some guidance around, since we are not providing the design tips in the LITE kit, you will know how to create them for yourself. You can write them on stickies or index cards and then stack them on the design tips section of the board. Once you can work through just one constellation. You can work through all the constellations. It's up to you. It's up to the amount of time you have. There's, again, no right or wrong answer. You will find as you're working through these with your team that you're going to have a lot of discussion, maybe heated. That's where your facilitator comes in. But and you might find that you can't decide. One person thinks that you should be on this end of the spectrum, another thinks you should be on another, and in that case, you just build your 2 personas. So the real kind of end product, your takeaway from this whole process, is the persona sheet, which you can see on the slide. It has an area where you can mark where your persona falls on the behavior attribute spectrum. You can list your objectives for your persona, for your business. You have your trigger events, and you can name your persona. One step that we like people to do is to take their design tips and do an affinity map with them. So if you end up with 40 design tips and you put your stickies or lay your index cards out, you might see that they kind of fall into logical groupings. It might be, here's how the person, likes to be communicated with. Here's how the person likes to learn. Here's how the person, I can't even think of a thing, but I'm trying to think how that, communication, how they learn, any number of things. It will depend on what design tips you end up. It could be even like preference for communication channels. So you can put your affinity mapping groupings here on your sheet as well. So you end up walking away with a full artifact that you can hand off to the designer and have them, work with that. So I'm going to let Priyama summarize MPACT.
Thank you. So just to be clear, we don't have design tips I'm not sure
in the LITE kit.
No. We don't have design tips in the LITE kit, but we do have instructions in the manual on how you can brainstorm design tips and how your team can brainstorm them and add them to this persona sheet. Because that really is the bit that makes your persona really actionable. So to summarize, I think I'll try and leave a little time at the end for questions. So what we talked about today is about personas keeping the focus on the customer and serving as a reference point when evaluating solutions. Several of you might already be familiar with personas. You might have already experienced some of its drawbacks, or you might have used it very effectively in your organization. And some of you might not be familiar with it, but I hope this talk was helpful to both kinds of people. For those who are familiar with personas, I hope we were able to drive home the point of behavior-based personas and how they are really great for forming the crux of your personas. We're not saying that don't add any demographic information. You can add it later once you're done with the creating the personality of the person, but don't let the demographic guide that action of creating the personality and the user needs. And always use research to understand what behavior attributes are important to your product. So we always talk about when you have the kit, you download it, you can actually use that to conduct research as well. So once you know the behavior attributes, you can craft your research around getting answers about what your user, which behavior attribute spectrum your user falls into. So it serves both purposes. And remember to bring that user that research back in. Other things we've done in the past is just looked at industry research or other attitudinal or psychographic research out there specific to a product or service, and use that to inform the kit if you have less time to collect first-hand research. And like we said, MPACT can also help you get stakeholder buy-in early in the process because it is collaborative. We encourage you to have several people come in, whether they're high level or the people who actually be using the personas at a tactical level. And it is a great conversation generator, so it's important to, we feel at least, to do it in a room and have that face-to-face conversation. MPACT also gives you the freedom to quickly create personas for individual projects, so you're not stuck with a one-size-fits-all. You can create a persona as your need changes. We've heard things from people as, isn't this counterintuitive? Isn't this, are we thinking of too many user types? But it is really identifying, like Dana was talking earlier about my specific traits and what that means for which behaviors you choose. So depending on the feature, the solution that you're working on, the behaviors that you select to create the persona could absolutely change. In some, you might just use a guidance constellation. In some, you might use a guidance and execution constellation. So acknowledging that in new features, in new products, certain other behavior attributes become more important than in others. So we hope that we were able to eliminate some of those flaws of personas that we talked about earlier that have been the reason that personas have been widely criticized and used less and less. So we've tried to reduce the time taken to create personas to ensure that it is based on research and also help the teams translate that research into actual personas in a way. And try to avoid creating stereotypes by focusing on behavior attributes rather than demographics. And the gameful approach of it, the colorful approach of it, makes it more fun, and people want to get involved. And this is what we've seen by the people who've already been using the kit. And like I said, you can make a new persona every time your need changes, and use the design tips to make it more actionable in real life and get buy-in from team and leadership. Before we get into the code, let's see if there are any questions.
Can you see them on yours, or there are some questions? Yeah.
I actually cannot.
Okay, let me bring my laptop over.
Can you just ask me the questions? Or ask
I can, yes, I just need to get close to you.
Yeah.
So people can hear it. Okay. So one person asked, what is the pricing for using MPACT?
Oh, yeah. We on the page after this, we will have a link, and if you get on there, we can send you all the details one-on-one. So there are different engagement models. We do it in a workshop model where we just teach you how to use the full kit. So we give you about three of these kits. If you have a large team, you can use this. We train the facilitators in that model. In the other model, we do research. We take your research and we synthesize it before we do this workshop. So when we're doing the workshop, we do it with your actual user data. And then we also have one in which we do custom. And it ranges in price, and we're happy to email you across the information.
But also, the big thing I want to say, the MPACT LITE kit is free.
Yeah.
That's the link we're going to be giving you. So you can get started for free with the MPACT LITE kit, and that code is coming to you shortly for download. And then the next question is, in the context of a single-day setting, how do you gather, employ evidence in developing these personas?
Employee evidence.
Yes. How do you gather evidence in developing those personas, or how do you use it?
Is the question that...
It's in the context of a single-day setting. Well, you would come... Yeah.
So if the question is how do you gather research in a single-day setting, I don't know what employee evidence is intended to mean there.
So, Erin, if you want to clarify your question, we will be happy to answer it. And then somebody, Ann, asked, where can I review more detail about the research that informs the MPACT kit?
I don't think we have it in a format that is widely available. But we can tell you a little bit about how we went about building it. Dana, do you think that would make sense? We did actually...
Yeah, that's a great idea.
We have slides that we cut out for time, but let me run through them super quickly. Oops, sorry. I'm completely ruining Catherine's format, but the event, the process of building this was really iterative. The research that we used was a lot of client research, so we cannot make it public facing. But what we did from that was build early iterations of how this works or how it could work, so that what you see up here is a very early iteration. And using all of that information, we created a lot of content. And you see on the left over here, this was really a lot of content. We actually ended up having to cut it down. This was an early prototype. And then we took, there was 5 of us that created the health kit, and 4 that originally created the method. So we scrubbed the previous research as well as psychological research around behavior change techniques and things like reciprocity, transference, etc. Just popular behavior psychological theories to see how that translates into the design tips. And then we took it out into the world, tried it with people, see if it made sense, tried it in workshops, etc. And that helped us sort of get validation on whether the content really helped people use it. And then we created the version that you see today, because we just iterate upon it. As you see up here, this is like a paper-based version of it, and then we moved on to a slightly more refined version. I know that doesn't answer your specific question, but I think what I can do is later with Catherine, I will give you a list of links of different psychological theories that we use as a basis. It won't translate one-to-one, but it will be helpful to look at.
Great, thank you. Let's see, can you give me some examples of specific therapy areas where this process has been used to direct design and what kind of metrics resulted?
So the health kit is our newest version, and while we have used it in the field of health, but so far just for health insurers, and we have not used it yet for like a drug therapy or a, like patient-facing something.
Yes.
So far, it's just been in health insurance.
But we did have an example from somebody who downloaded the MPACT LITE kit from Kaiser Permanente, and she used it, and we can talk a little bit more about how she used it, but it was for end-stage renal failure. So if you want to go to that slide, she did give us a quote and showed exactly how it used to inform her end-stage renal disease. We didn't get any business metrics from her at this time, but she did say it did really help to add dimension and have her create better how might we statements. So she has found it helpful. She also downloaded the kit, printed it, and had it laminated just to make it more robust. So there was options to make it your LITE kit fancier or send it out to a printer if you want to make it nicer. Okay, so next question. What personas do you use at MadPow to consider your own customers?
I'm not aware that we do. The cobbler's children go there.
I don't know. We actually have, I know we have a set of employee personas, so we sort of use as examples, but I don't think we have based customer personas yet, but that's a good idea.
Okay, so somebody else asked, okay, use it at MadPow with Carnate. Thanks for the good answer. Yes, please. Okay, so Aaron, the one who had that research question, he said, sure. If you're doing this in a single day, when do you conduct research that you use to develop the personas?
Yeah.
He said, presumably it's before, but I've also found that the discussion in this kind of process raises new questions that require research to answer.
Yeah. So presumably before, but we've also had settings in which we say that you have customer-facing staff in the room with you when you're having this discussion, the people who are really on the front lines of interacting with customers. So if there's any missing pieces of information, we found that they're able to fill that in. Again, that might not be the most data-based way of doing it. It's based on their personal experiences. But rather than making it up, it's better to ask a customer-facing staff what their experience has been. But yes, you might discover that there are gaps in the research itself that don't answer those questions that you're asking about the personality. So that's why we suggest using the kit, and as I talked about earlier, using the kit itself to craft your research. So to make sure that when you're doing the research before the session, you ask those questions about what kind of personalities your customers are showing, whether it's qualitative or it's a quantitative research study that you do.
Thank you. So Russell asked, can you talk more specifically about what data or research you need in order to generate personas?
Dana, do you want to take that one? Do you want me to go?
Wait, can you say that again?
Can you talk more specifically about what data or research you need in order to generate personas?
Yes, so what we found, I would say that for us, going through user interviews particularly, the types of things that you learn to listen to are when people are talking specifically about what they're feeling, what they're doing, what they're thinking. They are like, I got this bill in the mail and I opened up the envelope and I didn't understand anything. Or every year I have open enrollment and you learn from, lit review stuff I think is pretty self-explanatory, but the user interviews are golden, and it's really just developing an ear for not only what you hear from one person, but what you notice is a common thread throughout.
Can you say those 3 words again? What they felt, what they...
Yeah, so you're always trying to get to what is someone thinking, what is someone feeling, and what are the types of things that they might be saying.
And if you're asking about specific research methodologies. So just to make it super clear, you can do it with one-on-one interviews, surveys where you craft questions to get at the behavior attributes, and it's not necessarily asking them, hey, are you dependent on other people to make your health decision, or are you not dependent on other people to make your health decisions? But rather crafting it in a way that is that is more friendly, perhaps. So saying something like, when you have to make an important decision, do you first speak to your spouse? I mean, that's just assuming that the person has a spouse, or do you make it by yourself? So that questions like that can help you understand what kind of personality the people have, very specific to health. And we want to really drive home that point, because if someone displays a certain kind of attitude towards management of their health, it's not necessary that particular attitude is carried through in other factors of their life, because this person in finance could be very on top of everything and make decisions by themselves super quickly, but when it comes to their health, it might be the absolute opposite. So you have to understand and ensure that you collect research specific to the industry and that product and that specific, maybe even condition that you're working on. Other methodologies, I think, could be focus group sessions.
I also got a comment from somebody just to the panelists, so I don't know that others can see it. It says, one person suggested also direct observation, if we haven't mentioned it. You can develop personas along axes of behavior. So direct observation, obviously watching your customers, your target audience doing something and seeing what they don't even notice that they're doing, the shortcuts we all make just to get through the day. Any final questions? Oops, wait.
That last one.
Okay, how much experience do you have with having healthcare providers and or patients or sufferers in the room at the stage of building personas?
So we have not so far, I mean, let me put it this way. We do quite a bit of journey mapping work, and when we do journey mapping, we have often had, especially when we're working with health insurance clients or talking about benefit choices or how do you use your benefits, since we go after current members, many times in the discussion we will get someone who's dealing with a chronic health condition or has recently dealt with a loved one who passed away, or so when in the context of talking about their health journey, we get a lot. We often, I mean, almost always, because we're all patients, right? And most of us know someone who's living with something, even if it's just as, asthma or anxiety. So we have not done a specific persona project.
Yeah, I think that we have not facilitated such a session of having, if I'm understanding the question correctly, is having the provider and the patient in the room when you're working on this persona, right? If I'm understanding the question correctly. I know that we have not facilitated a session like that, but I know that we have had a specific provider, I can't really name, but has used the LITE kit in a medication adherence setting, and he talked about having his nurses and providers come in because his use of this was really to train budding clinicians. He was a professor, is a professor, to train future physicians of how to recognize different personality traits and how to speak to them individually and have a really personalized conversation with them. So we have not facilitated that, but I know it has been used in that setting.
So we got one more question, but while we're getting to that, can you bring up the code?
Yeah.
Okay, so everyone, this is the code. So to go to info.madpow.com/impact, and the code is DJUMPS or DJMPS. And I'll put that in the message box as well. But last question is that Anna also asks, chicken or eggs, do you health journey work first? Do you do health journey work first or persona building so that you know whose journey to map?
We usually do personas first because that helps us figure out what they would do in different steps of the journey. So by knowing the persona and knowing the personality very well, it helps us say that, okay, is this person going to go looking for more information at this point, or are they just going to accept what has been told to them? So we always tend to do the personas first.
Yeah.
Okay, and I think I just sent the message to everybody what the download link is along with the code, and I'll also be sending out an email after the fact with the recording. But if you want to go to the next slide, that would be great. Next, okay. So I wanted to say thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. I think for the great questions that you asked. It's been really helpful, and I hope you found this informative. We all thank you for being here. And just a final note, our Health Experience Design Conference will be taking place in April 2nd and 3rd. We actually have a call for speakers out right now. So up until December 7th, we want to hear from you about what you'd like to talk about at our upcoming conference. You can go to hxdconf.com and submit your proposal there. It's a pretty light request, about 300 words of a synopsis. So we'd love to get your input. Again, the deadline for that is December 7th, and I hope you'll also consider coming to our conference next April 2nd and 3rd here in Boston. So again, thank you so much for all of your time, and watch for an email with a recording.
And I would just say, if you do download the LITE kit and use it, please let us know how it worked for you, any suggestions. Pictures are always good too, because we're always interested in seeing how it's used in the wild.
Any final words, Brianna?
No, that's it. Just thank you for joining us. And for the person who asked about how you can have other options, the link that you have there, you can also write to us from that link, and we'll get back to you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.